Bum bum bum, literature gets a look. Legs talk about books. Hello and welcome back to Legs Talk About Books, the monthly literature podcast where we talk about books. I'm your host, Hardleg Joe. Joining me once again, the same old co-host since the start, Mr. CB Radio.
Yeah, CB apparently stands for Cool Books.
Cool Books, it apparently stands for 2 years we've been doing this.
Yes.
This is the 24th episode of a monthly podcast. Ah, nice.
Yeah.
I won't tell people my lucky number. It's a secret. I'll take that secret to my grave. You'll find out. But anyway, yeah, we're coming back and we're doing more Wheel of Time. And if you had told me when we read the first two Wheel of Time books on the first episode that we would be on the 8th and 9th books now, still trying to get through them, I probably would not have believed you.
Mm-hmm. It has been a long journey.
Yeah.
And I've definitely had the biggest character arc, I think, in
yeah,
this.
Famously, you couldn't finish the first book.
I just couldn't get into it.
I barely finished it and was just interested enough to do the second book, and I'm very glad I did, because of this, you ended up joining back on, and I think, book 6?
Yeah.
Which is probably the best place to join back on.
Actually, no, it wasn't book 6. It was book 0, and then book 6.
Yeah, we did the prequel. I forgot about that.
Yeah, the prequel is what got me back into it, and yeah.
Yeah, so technically we're on book 10 of 15.
Mm-hmm.
We're 2/3 of the way done. We're almost there. We probably won't last another fourth year.
Yeah.
Maybe third at most.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think it's going to take us the full year to get through these next 3 books.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see.
They are pretty big,
the next 5 books.
5, oh god, never mind. Maybe a year.
Yeah. We'll see. We try not to make the whole channel about that. That's why we do these things in 2-book clusters.
Mm-hmm.
With this time, we're doing The Path of Daggers and Winter's Heart.
Mm-hmm.
But to start with, as always, we usually do a spoiler-free talk first, sort of like a review, a recommendation to people, in case they haven't read the book and they would perhaps like to.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we're done with that, we're going to go into spoiler-filled discussion, just assuming you've either read or you're not going to read. Either way, you're just going to have to be along for the ride. Although in this case, we kind of have to break this into 2 tiers of spoilers.
Yeah.
Because it's possible we might have a lot of new people from last month's episode.
The Chuck Tingle experiment.
Yeah. At the time of recording, that hasn't gone up yet. We're kind of doing these back-to-back, so I have no idea if that was as popular as Empress Teresa or not. But either way, if you're joining in, if this is your first episode of Legs Talk About Books, and you're like, well, I don't know anything about this Wheel of Time.
Not enough sex and raptors in it.
Yes, if you're looking for more sex and raptors, there is not that much. Although there is some sex in this.
Oh yeah.
There's quite a lot of
a lot of bodices being undone apparently.
What's the word again? There's a lot of polygamy in this book.
Oh,
more polygamy than I would have expected. So if you're into polygamy, hey, this is the series for you.
You and Jordan, all polygamy all the time. All right.
They've got to look at things from all different perspectives. But yeah, if you couldn't tell by the fact that we got this far, we love this series.
Oh god,
yes. Both of us been using this this podcast to look at a lot of fantasy books, a lot of different fantasy series, and nothing has captivated us quite like Wheel of Time. If you have not checked it out yet, highly recommend that you check it out. If nothing else, watch our first episodes first.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're trying to jump in and this is your first episode, you're probably not going to understand even the spoiler-free talk.
At all.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the thing. We kind of have to break it into 2 tiers of spoilers, because the second tier is, if you haven't read these 2 books yet, but you've read the ones up to that, we can kind of explain it in the context of that. And the reason why people might not have read these ones is because, well, 1, the 6th book was kind of like the pinnacle of the series so far. The 7th wasn't bad, but it was certainly a fall from 6. And supposedly, the 8th, 9th, and 10th books in this series are the Slog. They're where things really slow down, we kind of lose the plot a little bit. A lot of people consider these 3 to be the weakest books in the series, before it picks up again near the end.
And small spoiler on this, they're right and they're wrong.
I'd say they're mostly wrong.
They're mostly wrong, but I have some good arguments as to why
Oh,
they're a
yeah.
little bit right.
We're now entering the second tier of spoilers. At least to me, I don't feel like this is a slog.
Oh, no.
There's still a lot of world building going on. There's still a lot of new settings and characters being introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, ton of exciting stuff happens. There's some really cool, like, cinematic moments, both at the start of Path of Daggers, with the Bowl of Wind stuff, which they've been setting up the last couple books, and then the end of Winter's Heart, which we won't get to for spoilers at all, because that's not set up.
You're getting me really hyped to talk about spoiler stuff, so let's just do the non-spoiler real quick.
Like I said, there's still a lot of exciting stuff in here. As Brandon's hinting, though, there are still some slow points in this book. Like I said, they continue to introduce new stuff, which means even though we're 2/3 of the way through the series, you still have to stop for periods to meet a whole bunch of new characters. There's a lot of Aes Sedai and Knitting Circle sea people that are getting introduced, and it's a lot of standing around and talking to people.
On top of the fact that when you're introduced with these new things, it's sometimes not as interesting as you would think.
Yeah. I remember the very first chapter of Path of Daggers, where it's just like, Elaine and Avienda are riding with this big caravan of women to use the Bowl of Winds, and the first chapter is just like, them taking turns talking to Elaine, and I'm like, when is this chapter going to end? Is this the slog? Like, this feels so slow. But then as soon as that chapter ended, like, it was pretty fast-paced from the rest of it.
Yeah.
Or at least fast-paced for Wheel of Time.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a lot of moments where you, like, it's like a heartbeat. There's just a good line, and then there's an uptick. And then,
bunch of exciting stuff happens.
Yeah, simultaneously, I would say yes. Again, you lean more towards it's not a slog at all. I've had a couple there were a couple parts in the stories that I was just kind of like, get to that part, get to that part, get to that part. But that's also good writing. It's definitely, it keeps you hooked even in the parts that are low. So.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, again, you haven't read all the books. I would consider, like, the first 2 books some of the worst. Compared to those, I don't know how you could see, like, this is a slog. Or compared to the fifth book to me is still the worst one. Where it's like, basically, I always reiterate this. At the start of the 4th book, the team breaks up into pairs, and they each find a way to fast travel to interesting ways in the world. And then the entire plot is like, people in these interesting places doing things. And then the 5th book is everyone walking back the hard way. And like, it has a neat climax, but like 90% of that book is walking back home from where you went. It feels like it should be the end of the story and not even the halfway point.
Admittedly, that may have been around the time that somebody pressured Jordan into making a map, so he had to be like, you have to sit through all of this.
You have to understand. But yeah, again, I don't want to discount the people who say it's a slog, because, you know, I get it. Not just because of all the characters, but the plot does kind of meander a bit. Like, for the first 7 books, each one felt like a step towards the final battle, TM.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, we're on our way to,
Tarmangaden.
Tarmangaden. Thank you for remembering that, because I forgot it.
They say it so many damn times in the book, like, everybody...
That's the whole plot, is preparing for the final battle with the Dark One.
Everybody who even speaks Rand's name is just like, he has to be at Tarmangaden. He has to be at Tarmangaden.
He has to be there. That's the prophecy. That's the only way we even stand a chance. And, you know, like, the first book is like, he realizes he's the chosen one. And then he does something epic where everyone else realizes he's the chosen one. And then in the 3rd book, he takes a city. And then in the 4th book, he takes a country. And then in the 5th book, he takes 2 more cities. And then in the 6th book, he gets the White Tower on board with him, the mages and everything. And then it's like, you get to the Path of Daggers, and suddenly things kind of stop.
Screech to a halt for him.
Yeah, they don't really screech to a halt, but he tries to make a push, and for the first time, it doesn't really work all that well, which we'll get more into with spoilers. There's actually some neat things to discuss with that, but I could understand if you're just wanting the story to continue this momentum, how the fact that, like, Path of Daggers stops, and then Winter's Heart is basically, like, dealing with why it stopped by taking a side quest that has little to do with what's been going on so far. But yeah, that's just my point. I do get it. It does feel a bit meandering, especially if you're, reading this as they came out, you had to wait like 2 years between each book. Especially because, famously, Book 7 ended on a cliffhanger for Matt. And then Book 8 does not have Matt in it at all.
Oh, I felt that. I felt that.
Book 8 ends with a cliffhanger on Egwene, and then doesn't pick up in Book 9. You don't get an Egwene chapter, really. You don't really learn anything that's happening with her. Instead, you spend a lot more time with Elaine doing stuff that, like, I didn't think this would even be part of the plot.
Yeah, literal cliffhangers that... Jordan has a really good way of shuffling out his cast and somehow keeping you invested.
Yeah. That's the thing for me, is what makes these books is the setting and the characters. Mm-hmm. I've been saying this since the start. Wheel of Time is a masterclass in world building. It's a masterclass in making you understand characters and cultures and cities and stuff like that. And if you're going into it looking for that, these books still deliver on that. They still give you everything that you want from it.
Oh, hell yeah.
If you're going in looking for plot, yes, it does kind of sidetrack. Yes, it is a little slow. But that's not why I come to Wheel of Time. That's not what endeared me to Wheel of Time.
What endears me is the fact that I find myself saying stuff like, light, this is amazing, in my head.
May you find water and shade, my friend.
That one was fun, but I have now entered that into my vernacular, using light as just like it freaks me out now sometimes. I'm just like, oh, light, this is a beautiful day. What? No, this is not a real language. Stop.
It's weird because, like, the first couple times you read it, it feels like that same, like, made-up fantasy talk. I remember reading Furies of Calderon, and they're like, blood and crows or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it never quite stuck or felt natural to me. And something... for whatever reason in this, where they're like, blood and bloody ashes!
Yeah, flame... though you don't hear flamin' as much.
Well, flamin's considered like a curse word to them.
Yeah.
The one Uno gets like yelled at every time he's like, flamin' girls in their bloody dresses everywhere, rocking around. Mm-hmm. But yes, real quickly, while we're still in the spoiler-free territory, I wanted to give my brand new tier list, including these two books. So all
right, let's do this.
We didn't write down your tier list. I'm not sure if you want to make one of those for next time, or if you just want to... I guess you could just say if you agree with me from what you've read. But for me, S tier, still, The Shadow Rising and Lord of Chaos.
I haven't read The Shadow Rising, so Lord of Chaos definitely still up there.
Definitely S tier. And these are in order by me. I still think Shadow Rising is better than Lord of Chaos. That's still, if you go back to that episode, that is like the best fantasy book I've ever read, and it still holds up. Still better than all the rest of these. A tier, Dragon Reborn, and I would put The Path of Daggers in there. I think I described A tier as being like, it didn't, make me cry. It didn't make me, realize anything new about my life, but it was just a thoroughly entertaining story from start to finish. And Path of Daggers is, one boring chapter, and then you're just on a bop baby from, battle scene to battle scene, Rand dealing with all this stuff. I guess I can't go into spoilers or whatever, but the Bowl of Wind stuff and everything that follows after that. Very exciting stuff.
I would, oddly enough, put New Spring up there with it, because again, it's what got me back into it, and just, yeah, there was a lot of, slogging points where they're in the tower, and they're just talking about how all this, but it builds up a relationship that you understand more and more about, Swan and Moraine, and it's very, very cool. I liked that, but
I kind of felt like I already understood them from the other books, so maybe that's why, New Spring for me is a lot lower. But yeah, those are my two A tiers. B tier, I would put Winter's Heart.
Yeah.
As it's the start of B tier. It's not quite as good at those. There are some points where I'm like, this is kind of dragging.
And that end.
Yeah, it's basically the ending that keeps it up at the very top of B tier. If it weren't for that, it would probably be lower in B tier. But it's definitely not, it's not even in C tier for me. But yeah, B tier is Winter's Heart, The Great Hunt. It's basically like The Great Hunt, where The Great Hunt was some mediocre stuff at the beginning, but a really great opening and a really great ending. And this just had double great ending. And then cool stuff with Far Matting. I like that. That's a neat setting. Crown of Swords is kind of after that. Again, it's kind of stuff happened. It was neat. And then I put New Spring in there. You got to learn some things. It's B tier. It was a good time. I didn't really get a whole lot out of it. And then C tier is Eye of the World, the first book, which I barely finished. and Fires of Heaven, which I contend is mostly walking, and also has the menagerie comes back in these books. I'm not sure if I had explained that to you. The guy that they're talking to in the menagerie is the guy where they spend like 50% of book 5 just sort of like in disguise being circus performers in this guy's menagerie, and it's just like, what is this slice of life circus bullshit? I don't know. Please. So yeah, but even then, like, you know, Fires of Heaven is C tier. There's no D tier Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
No F tier, not yet at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. Pretty much, even people who don't subscribe to there being a slog, even people who disagree about the 8th and 9th books, seem to really not like Book 10. Crossroads of Twilight is like pretty much generally considered the worst book.
Oh boy, this is gonna be fun.
It'll be really interesting. Our plan, I mean, I guess we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but our plan is to, the next time, do 10 and 11. So we'll have the worst book, and then Knife of Dreams is often put up there with, like, the 4th book and the 6th book as being, like, the best. Like, after the slog, it suddenly rockets up to new heights.
So we're essentially going to be taking our medicine and we're going to have a chaser afterwards. So we're getting ready for that.
But yes, with our reviews and recommendations out of the way... Oh wait, did we actually give a recommendation? Recommendation is to continue reading if you're already doing it. Yes. These are not a slog. These are really good. Path of Daggers is, again, like, 4th best book for me. Please continue reading. Same with you?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely reinvigorated my love of books and stories.
Books and fantasy in general. Continue going. And with that said, now let's going to get into spoiler territory. Now let's talk about some of the things here. And I think the very first thing I wanted to say had to do, again, with the Path of Daggers. Which I gotta say, probably one of the better titles, just as far as, like, you know, the road to success is a path paved with daggers.
I liked the Crown of Swords.
Yes.
In the sense of kind of like the Game of Thrones and the Clash of Kings, kind of like how that one sits.
The Crown of Swords, to me, was kind of undercut by the fact that there's a literal Crown of Swords.
Yeah, fair point. But that's only like the stinger at the end.
Yeah. At the beginning, they're talking about, like, the weight of being a king, and they're like, it's like wearing a crown of swords, constantly poking in your head where you can never forget the responsibilities you have.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, neat.
Yeah.
But Path of Daggers, a lot better.
Yeah.
I kind of like what Jordan's done, yet again, where he could have gone with the straight theme. There's been a theme throughout the first 7 books, which has been Rand slowly evolving, not just Rand, but everyone slowly evolving from a regular villager to realizing they have bigger and more important responsibility. It's one of those things, especially, I feel like you might have missed out a little bit on it. There's a lot of stuff in the 2nd book where, like, Rand is still wearing his wool clothing from the 2 rivers, and Moraine gives him a box that has, like, a bunch of, like, golden and red, like, silk clothes. Like, some very fancy nobleman-looking clothes. And I think at one point, like, he goes to sleep and wakes up and his regular clothes are missing and it's just that. So he has to dress up like that. And she's kind of teaching him, like, regular soldiers keep calling him Lord Rand. And kind of like with Perrin, where he's like, don't call me a lord. Like, I'm not a lord, I'm just a normal guy. But unlike Perrin, Rand kind of realizes pretty early on, the first time he gets to Kyrian, like, if I say I'm a lord, people will take me more seriously. It's been a lot of that through over the last couple books, sort of like, I need to be harder. I need to be more stern. And that kind of came to a head in the 6th book, where the slightest softness that he had was taken advantage by the White Tower. Bad things happen to him. And you end with that, like, final line where he's just like, no, I'm not giving you the option anymore. Kneel or be knelt. Those are your options.
I miss good stout Two Rivers wool. Yeah.
Woolens, this Naveen. But I mean, it's the same thing that everyone's kind of had to do. You know, Matt's learning to be more responsible. Naveen has learned to be more responsible. She's had kind of an arc. I've really kind of appreciated the way that, like, marrying Lan has sort of made her be more calm, more conscious of the fact that she bitches people out all the time. Yeah. And maybe she shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, she also has somebody to, like, literally bitch at for, like, hours that will just give her the dead eye and doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, you know, the 6th book was kind of like the pinnacle of Rand learning to be the hard world-conquering king that he needs to be. Mm-hmm. And the 7th book was kind of weird in that Rand was almost, like,
vindicated.
Too hard. Like, he was doing things and they almost weren't working because he was trying to be too much of a solid badass, I guess.
Yeah.
And that comes to a head in the Path of Daggers. In walking the Path of Daggers, like, he goes back and gets Kalindor, the most powerful Angriel, and he decides to use it to fight the Shan-Chan. And it turns out he doesn't understand it as well as he thinks he does.
It goes perfectly well, man.
He doesn't understand the Shan-Chan as well as he thinks he does. His overconfidence is his downfall. Mm-hmm. And there's this very telling conversation between Cadsuane and the Aiel woman whose name is it Amis?
Amis, yeah. I can never remember which one.
These two very old, very wise women.
These are the badass women.
And both kind of trying to control Rand.
I wouldn't use the term control. That sounds
sounds manipulative.
It sounds more like what Elida is trying to do. What Amis and Cadsuane are trying to do are trying to shape him into a good man.
Trying to help him.
Yeah.
And they have this discussion. Actually, let me get the quote out of here. I believe it's somewhere in here. Mm-hmm. Do you believe a man must be hard or strong? Most men see the two as one and the same, but there is a fundamental difference. Strong endures, hard shatters.
Yeah.
When you try to harden yourself to the world, you make yourself inflexible. Mm. And they both see that happening to Rand. He's trying too hard to be this, like, very stern king. I think Cadsuane specifically says, my job is to make this man laugh again. Mm-hmm. He needs to remember that he's human. He needs to be humbled. He needs to rely on others. Because right now he feels like he has to bear the entire weight on his shoulders. He's trying to make himself as hard as he can. And he can't carry the world on it by himself. He will crumble.
Oh, yeah.
He needs to be strong enough to endure the things that are coming. Which means, again, learning humility, learning to laugh, learning to be more like that farm boy that he's left behind.
Also, little fun parts about that is, like, every once in a while when you hear through Rand's, like, thought process, you hear him call himself, I need to harden myself. I need to harden... Like,
he uses them interchangeably. Like she says, most men don't know the difference between hard and strong.
He actually starts, at one point in time, later on in Winter's Heart, he says something like, I am steel. And I'm like, no, you're not. No.
The last of my softness is gone. Mm-hmm. I am steel now.
Yep. And, but onto, from very depressing, but also awesome parts, there's a lot of comedy in these books. Like, I mean, yeah, there's some comedy you get from, like, characters interacting, but then there's comedy of, hey, all right, we've bound together 3 women that love a man to another man in an amazing scene, and then one of them has sex with the other one, and they all feel it, and they just can't stop that feeling.
I'm not even sure if that's, like, comedy. That was just, like, really...
Awkward.
Awkward.
It was awkward and it was hilarious in my my reading of it because the characters' reactions felt both genuine and awkward at the same time in a way that I was just like, oh my god, this is actually happening. This is actually happening.
I don't know. It's the book, the things it does with binding in general. I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it because they've established binding someone to someone else as like the warder bond. The warders protect the Aes Sedai. When they get bound, they kind of know where they're at. They can kind of sense their emotions, if not feel them. And then at the start of Winter's Heart, Aviendha and Elaine get bound together as like sisters.
Yep.
Like they had talked before about like this relationship, like you and I will have the same husband, so we will be near sisters. And you just kind of assume like, oh, that's kind of like being a sister-in-law, right? You gotta do, and then they're like, no, there's a ceremony for that.
It's basically...
I'm like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like a marriage thing. Like, you take a vow or whatever, and then it's No, we are going to bind you together in a way that can never be broken.
It's just Wise Woman Fight Club.
Yeah.
Strip down naked, hit me as hard as you possibly can. I said hit me as hard as you possibly can.
You must tell them the thing that you hate most about them, and then be able to forgive them for it.
Yeah, it's a oddly very, like, emotionally heartfelt and intense scene.
It's entirely like a religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
You get the feeling from them that this is like a world-changing thing. Like, they look at each other and they're like, you are my sister now.
I love that, yeah. It's, when they said that she's my sister in, like, earlier parts of that book, it felt very much like, hey, it's my sister. Like,
now when they say it, they mean it.
It's this very much like, they're saying it, like, naturally.
Yeah, they actually feel like they're sisters. And it's one of those things, like with almost any religious thing, it can be very beautiful, but from the outside, it can also seem really culty. It can seem really disturbing almost. It's like, there's like naked women hugging about, and they're like hitting each other and shit. I don't know. This seems really weird.
All right, when the tower had to elect a new Amerlin seat, and they all had to be topless for it, that was my culty moment. Yeah. I'm already past that.
Well, that's the thing. That's the weird thing is like when the White Tower, the organization of mages, elects a new leader, they don't use magic for it.
Mm-hmm.
But when two women want to marry the same man in Aiel culture, they use magic to bind them together in a way that can never be broken.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of not having a weird relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good way of, like, you know, making sure everyone gets along, making sure that you can have polygamy in a way that, like, doesn't hurt everyone's feelings, I guess.
Yeah.
The one point that made me laugh talking about comedy, though, was again like Elaine and Avienda. Elaine, Avienda, and Min are all marrying Rand.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how it is. It makes sense in the book, but even then, it still feels kind of like sudden almost. It feels like it's a Ta'Veren thing.
For me, I've watched enough harem anime for me to be just like, yeah, this is happening.
At least it doesn't seem based entirely on, like, appearances. Like, they all genuinely seem to like each other.
Oh, yeah, no, that's when they talk about, like, the golden threads of love coming off of that, that's a really comforting and amazing moment because you feel like they exchange that love. It's not just, like, I send it out or I receive it. It's very much like
It's a back and forth kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I just like that where it's like, Elaine and Avienda have been spending this entire book together, like, learning to like each other more. Elaine's been learning about, like, the Aiel ways. Avienda's been learning more about Wetlander ways. She's been trying not to call them Wetlanders so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then meanwhile, Min is just like, hi, guys. What's up?
Who's up for a foursome?
And then they don't have a foursome yet. As far as I know, they have enough privacy. But, no, the thing that made me laugh was just, like, Avienda's like, look, you have toe towards him. Min's like, I don't know what this has to do with anyone's toes, but I think we should apologize. It's like, she doesn't know anything about the Aiel.
She does. She says it later.
Oh, she does?
Yep, she retacks that information in that moment that's really funny where they're all screaming at each other. Why does this feel like this?
Yeah. Because, again, I guess we should explain for those of you who haven't been... Because, like I said, there's the weird bonding, and they set up the bonding between the warders and the
Aes
Sedai. And then they have this, like, sisterly bond. And then they basically, all three of them bond with Rand.
And Elaine has already bonded with Brigida.
Yeah, and she's also bonded with Avienda as sisters. And also, an Aes Sedai forcibly bonded Rand a couple books back. So now it's like, Rand just has like 9 different people by proxy connected to him in this weird web of like, barely tangible mind control.
And then he decides to have sex with one of the people that's going to have a crux moment with everyone. And just like, everyone's... The Aes Sedai...
Again, you're like familiar of the emotions going through someone's head. You don't necessarily feel them. Well, you do with the warder bond. If they're angry, you can get a little ticked.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yeah, and then Rand sleeps with Elaine, and it's like the 3 other girls, and also Elaine's warder, and also the Aes Sedai in the other city, are all kind of feeling like the combined lust of both of them reflected back. And they're just like, we need to drink. We need to get drunk now.
And my favorite part is that, like, the Aes Sedai that forcibly bounded him did not get that option, so she just passes out one day. That's what I think has happened.
I don't know. They said that was one of those things where it's like, oh, where's she at? And they're like, oh, she said she wasn't feeling well, so she's been in her quarters all day.
Yeah.
They said she's sick. She passed out. I don't think she passed out. I think something else happened, and they're just trying to save face.
She tried to sit in a cold bath of water, just started bubbling by the time she was sitting there, like, oh my god.
But yeah, I guess it's weird because, like, that had nothing to do with Cad Swain or Amis. That's just something that happened. Mm-hmm. But that is one of those things that, like, you know, Rand has been going this whole time where he's like, I shouldn't love anyone because anyone, like, I'm going to die in the final battle. I need to be disconnected because anyone can be used against me. Mm-hmm. Anyone is a liability. They're going to come after me and they'll hit the people who are next to me. And this is just one of those things where they all finally confront him and he's like, I'm a terrible person. I'm attracted to all three of you, even though I shouldn't even be attracted to one of you. And they're like, fuck it, we don't care. We'll all marry you.
Yeah.
And he's like, fucking what? And then Naveen has like a panic attack. Because she doesn't actually have a panic attack, but she's from, like, the Two Rivers, you know, this very,
you marry
like...
one man?
We're a small farming village, alright? Normally you don't kiss someone until after you marry them. I don't like this whole 3 people marrying one guy.
She about pulls her roots out, just...
tugging on braid intensifies.
Yeah.
She hasn't been doing that as much, but I mean, she heard that.
Yeah, she's like, hands shot up to her braid, and she's just not, you know,
we're all gonna marry Rand, and Rand's like, don't tell my dad. I don't think he'll understand.
Oh, man.
I haven't seen him in years, and I don't know how I can explain it at this point. Life's a hell of a drug. We've been on a ride, let me tell you what.
Yeah, man.
But... no, just about the going back to the strong endures, the hard shatters, the whole theme of A Path of Daggers. Mm-hmm. I was really impressed by it. I can get why people don't like it because it kind of feels like a step backwards in a way. But at the same time, so many stories are about like linear character growth. They start here, they end here, and you just go on a line. Maybe there's a bump somewhere along the line, but you go from point A to point B. And it's really refreshing to see, like, you know, Rand starts at A, they want him to go to B, and by book 7, he has overshot B. He actually needs to turn around and go back. They're like, whoa, you're developing too much. You need to devolve a little bit. You actually need to go back and learn what your roots are. And maybe it's just because there's very few stories that go on this long. But I really appreciated the fact that we had character development where you have to take a step back and realize, like, maybe I've gone too far. Maybe I could learn something from my old self. Maybe not every change is a good change. And, yeah, it was just really refreshing. And I think the way they're setting things up, every character is kind of going through that. Or is going to go through that a little way. At least with Perrin, it's kind of seeming
I can see a parallel with Egwene on that one. She's trying to be the Amerlin seat so bad that she may...
end up making some pretty dire mistakes.
I mean, she's in charge of an army assaulting the entirety of a mage army.
Well, and even Elaine, like, trying so hard to be queen from the start, she may have to learn to be more like a regular person. But, yeah, you had a point that you wanted to talk about. Mostly because this is something I experienced a lot in the second book, where one of the girls got leashed by the Shan-Chan when they first arrived, and there was this very uncomfortable, like, mind control sort of slavery thing going on.
Yeah.
That has this very hopeless feeling.
I wouldn't even consider it to be considered slavery.
It's nothing like human slavery for the most part. It's like on a whole different level. If you don't know, it's the Shan-Chan. I mean, they do have regular slavery too. You can be, but it's as a punishment for a crime. You can be sold as property. Certain crimes you get put to death, and if it's not worthy of being put to death, you probably get made a slave.
Admittedly, like the slavery we're about to talk about is basically a coffin, and that the societal stuff is just the dirt on top of it.
Yeah,
it's just that, like, you're already in a box, but this is
Yeah, but what we're talking about is the relationship between the Soldam and the Damani?
Damani.
Yeah. Which are, in the Shan culture, women who can channel, instead of being great wizards, are basically, they find out you can channel when you're, I think, like 12 or 14 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they put a collar on you where another woman can control your mind, essentially. Or they can inflict pain on you. They can like basically channel through the leash.
Just think of it this way: anything involving reward and punishment involving the mind, they get to cut through all the middleman.
It's basically like being bonded, except it's instead of like being bonded to a specific person, it's whoever holds that leash has your bond.
Mm-hmm.
And so they talk about like they basically treat the Damani as animals
yeah.
and like horses. They talk like they have a conversation about training them, like, oh, some are more difficult to break than others, but I find there are different techniques. You do something good, the person holding your leash gives you a little bit of candy, and then the pride that they feel at having you did what they told you to do translates through that leash. So you feel happy that you've pleased your master, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like, oh, I did a good job, and I get a little bit of candy. Isn't that nice? And they talk about, like, they capture these people, and they capture Aes Sedai, who are, like, 100 years old.
Not like 13-year-old girls that you can shape and mold from, like, they're in their adolescent years that you can manipulate their...
Yeah, someone who has, like, a personality and a long history and all these things,
mm-hmm.
and someone who, like, you know... I'm a trained wizard, essentially. I'm a trained Aes Sedai. Like, you cannot break me. You cannot get rid of who I am. And then within, like, a couple months, they're, like, responding to the name that the Shan have gotten them. Mm. They're, like, they don't even have to give them candy. They just, like, good job, Suan. And she's just like, oh, why, thank you, mistress. I'll do my best.
The thing that freaks me out the most, other than that, like, the Aes Sedai women are starting to respond to stupid dog names they're given.
Yeah.
Is that there's the fucking prettiest Damani contest.
Yeah. I think I was telling you this, where it's like, they treat the Damani like animals, like horses or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And not only has it made me hate the Shan, it's kind of made me hate how we treat horses. Like, I have become more aware of animal rights by having someone experience what it's like to be an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like the listening to a dog trainer talk almost callously about like, oh, you just have to positively and negatively reinforce their behavior. And it's like, you're shaping their psychology. You're like binding them to your will, and while like completely ignoring any thoughts or desires they may have. And it's just, it's very unsettling.
It's unsettling very until you realize that you can't physically communicate with them, as opposed to these people that are literally able to speak to you human to human.
Yeah. Oh no, don't worry. I'm not like talking about like we need to free all the animals or whatever. But it's like, you know, I will never own a horse or a dog or a cat.
I want to get a horse. If anybody wants to give me a horse, I'm so in for that. I would not mind learning how to ride a horse.
But like, it just made me more cognizant of the idea that like, yes, if I get a dog, it'll probably love me unconditionally. Because I've trapped it in a house and taught it to love me to get food, and if it bit me, I would probably take it back or have it euthanized or something. Like, we have not just, like, individually trained these dogs, but over the centuries, conditioned and selectively bred dogs to be these docile things.
Also, a point that I've yet to actually put into this podcast, since we're talking about animals, I think Brandon Sanderson, that Jordan really has a love for horses, because I had not known what a different type of horse. I'd like read so many different fantasy novels. Everybody's riding around on horses, and he's the only one that's been like, everybody else has a different horse. This one is a gray mare. This one is a
brown gelding.
A brown gelding. I didn't know what a fucking gelding was until I read these books.
Yeah, whenever it goes to Matt's perspective, you could tell he's at very least researched a lot about horses.
Oh yeah, it's just really refreshing and kind of like, it's one of those things where like the author's love of something perhaps bleeds into it, and it's real fun.
Yeah. In general, I find, like, not just with horses, but he seems to know a lot more about medieval life than I did. Like, I didn't know, like, people brushed their teeth with, like, a stick and salt.
That doesn't shock me.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me, but it's one of those things that, like, I've never heard in another fantasy thing, because I've never had someone, like, get up and go through their routine in the same way they do in Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're getting kind of off track here. The point is, they have this sort of, like, slavery via the Adam. That's what they're called, the leashes.
Yeah.
Idam. It's spelled with an A. It's like A''DAM, so I always think of it as a dam.
Yeah.
But it's an Idam. And in the second book, Egwene actually gets captured by the Seanchan and turned into a Damani for a little bit. And so, like, I remember reading that and being like, man, this shit is dark as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your first experience with it, and you're like, this is very uncomfortable.
Well, I'd already felt that when you described it before, but then, like, there's this character, this Red Sister, who, the Red Sisters are already a lot more blustery and a lot more, like, outspoken than most of the other
They're
ones.
like, they're the bad guy Aes Sedai, essentially. You're supposed to dislike them, because they have an instant distrust of everyone and they hate Rand specifically.
I wouldn't say they're the bad guy. They're the bad boy at Aes Sedai. Bad guy Aes Sedai are the Black Side, Black Sisters. But no, they're the Aes Sedai that you're just like, they're not going to be changed. They're dissuaded from anything, and then one
they're
of them
too hardline.
Yeah, they're very hardline. And one of them gets captured, and she's given an opportunity to possibly escape, and you see this, like...
You see, when they finally go to rescue her, she, like, hesitates for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that, like, the fact that she's hesitating is, like, killing her inside.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like, oh god,
it shivers. It's, like I said, it's a fate worse than death in a lot of ways. It's like the removal of your humanity.
And yeah, that kind of informs and shows us the character reactions of a character we were introduced to in this ninth book, Olivia.
Who's a captured Damani.
She's like one of those ones that they got when they were 13. And she's a 400-year-old woman, you find out, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, she looks like she's in her, like, 50s. Like, she looks kind of old, but she's like They find out that she's, like, one of the oldest people in the entire book.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this really, like, there's a scene where she meets an Ashaman, and she says this line, like, those Ashaman aren't weapons, I'm a weapon. And she's this very flat line. And then later on in that book, they're, like, at this very lull moment, and
they're just hanging out.
She's just hanging out, and then I was like, you want to play Cat's Cradle? And it's
she has this toy, and she's very excited that she gets to play with toys again.
And it's just this very heartbreaking thing of this, like, this woman never got to be a person.
Yeah. She basically, like, all her development stopped at 13 because they stopped treating her like a person and started treating her like a weapon. You are because that's how they use the Damani. I'm not sure if we've made that clear, that, like, the Soldam are a military force. They have the Damani on the leashes, and they use them to channel fireballs and lightning. That's what makes the Seanchan such a dangerous force, because, like, for one, there's only, like, what? I think they said, like, less than 1,000 Aes Sedai in the entire continent, and they all take this oath that they cannot use the one power to harm another person unless their life is in danger.
Or they're a dark friend.
But the Seanchan aren't dark friends. They don't worship. They're coming in the name of the light. They just worship the light differently than other people. But that's the thing, is, like, you basically have 1,000 Aes Sedai who are hampered by themselves to make sure that they can't be used as a weapon, versus a society that has been breeding women who can channel to be weapons for 1,000 years. And that's what they're like, you know, they make a big deal of the Ashaman, who are the men who can channel, that Rand has been gathering together and having someone train to be soldiers.
Only for, like, 6 months, too.
For, like, 6 months. And they were the ones, like, the entire climax of the 6th book was the Ashaman being unleashed against the Aiel, who are, like, the most powerful warriors in this world, and just, like, completely decimating them by being able to, like, look at them and explode them from the inside. It's just like a meat grinder. They just blew through, like, 1,000 men in, like, a minute. And then you turn to the Damani, and again, you have this woman who's been a Damani for 400 years, and she's like, they're not weapons. I am a weapon. I have been a weapon longer than they've been born. I was trained by someone who had been training women to be weapons for hundreds of years. I am a steel sword, you are a copper dagger.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's there's on the flip side of this slavery, there's this really interesting part about, like, you get to see from one of the trainers' perspectives, and this was one of the ladies that was at Thalma, I think it was?
Falm.
Yeah.
Or I guess Falma, is that how
Falma. Where...
that's where the Shan-Chan first attacked
mm-hmm.
in the second book. And then they got driven back because Matt blew the horn of the hunt and summoned Arthur Hawking and his 100 companions, including Brigitte, and they swept through and pushed them back into the sea.
And during that, two of the Soldam, the people that... Because to actually use the Soldam on a Damani, you actually have to be able to channel a little bit.
That's kind of the thing they figured out, is when they freed Egwene from... They took the necklace off of her, they didn't know how it worked, so they just put it immediately on the girl who had captured her. And they make a big point of like, oh yeah, you can put this on a regular person, it won't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But they put it on her and they can control her. And they're like, oh, so basically the people who hold the leashes can only use them because they can channel a little bit. They're not as good at it, but the fact that they can channel, if that information can get out, it could ruin their entire civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Because suddenly these people you've been treated like animals are also the same people that are highly respected members of society who lead, like, the most premier units. It's like finding out your cavalry commander is a horse.
Yeah. It's chicken boo all over again. But yeah, these are really, like, you get from her perspective, and she's just very panicked about it, and I love that.
Yeah, because she escaped afterwards eventually.
And
what was it?
Stars her. You actually hear, like, the images are still burned in her mind, and she still was like...
They were talking about, like, oh, she was on par to be... I forget what the rank is, but there's a word they have for, like, basically a general of the Soldam units or whatever. They're like, oh, she could have been Grand Soldam. And then after Falm, for whatever reason, she just, like, didn't want to train people very much, didn't really have her heart into it.
Mm.
Like, they have to... She's like, she's been reprimanded, like, 20 times for laziness, and she's not training people. She can't bring herself to punish people because she knows.
Also, this is all a great little build-up to... there's a breakout near the end of the 9th book. Because you've seen all these characters, these couple of characters get, like, broken down. But then you break out another one of these characters. Another Damani is being broken out. And she has enough spark to say that I will fight back and find all of my sisters and unchain them.
I'm going to free them.
And... that took me from being, like, gut-wrenching from that to being like, fuck yeah, let's do this!
Like I said, the big turning point for Naveen in the second book is that for the whole first and second book, Naveen is like a complete bitch. She is angry all the time, she takes out her anger on the people around her, she's very unpleasant to be around. And the only kind of interesting thing is like, oh, but when she's angry, she can channel. And she's one of the most powerful channelers when she's angry.
Not anymore, but...
Yeah, but for a while she was... I mean, even now she's like 3rd or 4th or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact... And then you get to that moment in Falm, where they rescue Egwene, and she sort of realizes what's been done to Egwene, and she is so angry. And the Soldam come running out, and they're like... Cast the fireballs! And Naveen is just like, no. And she just, like, raises the earth up underneath them. She is just like lightning and fireballs. And then, like, they switch to another character and like, what is that? A whole army of Aes Sedai here to fight? Like, no, it's just Naveen. More pissed than you've ever seen. And for the first time, I'm like, thank God you are such a bitch, because... Seeing you turn that around on everyone is the most satisfying, like, thing. It's that moment you realize, like, she may be a hard ass, but she's our hard ass.
Well, I think that's a really good segue into our, maybe not the Naveen part, but, like, getting a different perspective on the Shan-Chan.
Yeah, I did want to speak about the Shan-Chan, because one of the things that Robert Jordan's been really good with throughout the entire series is, like, introducing a person... or a concept, or a city, or a culture, and you think you understand it.
You don't get just like one character. You get a couple of like...
You get a couple characters talking about rumors, and you're like, okay, I think I got a grasp on this. Like, before you ever meet an Aiel, you hear about them, about, like, they're these great warriors, but they're kind of savage, and they don't believe in this, and they believe in that. And then you meet one, and you're like, oh, you're not quite what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And then you go and live in their city, and you're like, oh, you're really a lot more complex than that. You're not savage at all. You're not, like, even like a warrior... I mean, I guess you're kind of a warrior culture, but there's more to it than that.
It's not as simple cut as a warrior class.
Like, the people see the warriors because those are the people who came across the Dragon Wall. But they talk about, like, the Hold and the mistress of the Hold. We're like,
Roof Mistress.
Roof Mistress, yeah, that's what it's called. And they're like, inside the town, the chief warrior basically surrenders his power to the Roof Mistress, who is essentially the mayor of the city.
Yeah.
And there's this really interesting power dynamic. And then again, you start to get perspectives from Aiel. You start to hear what Avienda thinks. You start to hear what, like, Bade and Chide and them think. And throughout all that, your perspective of the Aiel completely changes. You get much more in-depth with them. And it's been doing that throughout this, with, like, every culture. You always think you understand it, and then you learn it's more complex than that.
Like the Sea Folk and all this other... Yeah, like, everybody... Jordan's really great about giving you... just enough for you to be interested in about a culture, and then giving you everything you've needed to know about that culture.
And it's not just good from an entertainment standpoint. Like, obviously I love learning about these cultures, but if there could be said to be a theme about Wheel of Time as a whole, I guess it's basically about not judging other people's cultures until you understand them. It's about... you don't quite know the truth just by hearing about it from other people. You have to hear about it from them.
Yeah.
You have to sort of walk a mile in someone's shoes. And I've been told that all my life, and I've never understood it as clearly as I have while reading Wheel of Time. All that being said, when they first introduce you to the Shanshan, they are terrifying. They have mind control enslaved wizards working for them. They introduce, like, this idea of a caste system where they have, like, the Blood, who are these very high-ranking people, and they have, like, servants who wear, like, the flimsiest of clothes and are basically treated like furniture a lot of times.
Yeah.
And just like talking about, like, oh, you stole something? You get made property. Oh, you slapped someone? Well, that makes your head on a pike. Like, they are very authoritarian.
Yeah, there's no cut or dry.
They talk about, like, are there guards in Shanshan? Like, what would we need guards for? Anyone who would think about doing a crime is dead or property.
Yeah.
Probably one and then the other first. And in these books, you finally get some Shanshan perspective.
Finally. So they're not that bad, right?
No. You finally get to see them, and they're still just as terrifying as before. You get to learn about their religion and why they think it's okay to treat people like property, why it's okay that some people get to be Saldam. Again, you hear them talk about them, and it's like they're training horses.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've got a stable back home. I have to show you. She was a wild one for a while, but I finally broke her, and now she's able to do the most amazing tricks. I'll enter her in the prettiest domain contest next May, you'll see.
And it's just like, ugh, God, it's horrifying.
And it's one of those things, too, where it's like, I don't know how you're going to get out of this. They do offer a little bit of, like, you know, if they could make everyone realize that Soldam and Damani were all people, it might disrupt a lot of their society. But I'm like, I don't think that's gonna, like, dethrone the Empress, may she live forever.
Don't you start that either.
That's one of the craziest things, is like, every time they say the Empress, they always say, the Empress, may she live forever. And then you get, like, an inner monologue on their head, and they think it too.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the, like...
They're not just saying it to be polite. They really want her to live forever.
Yeah, Jordan has done a remarkable thing. He has made a society that functions, but is also so broken that you have no idea of how to dismantle it.
It functions with ruthless efficiency.
And just, again, like, how would you dismantle it? Where would you even begin?
Yeah, it's I don't know, at the risk of getting political, it almost kind of feels like, like American capitalism in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, you have this big system that is obviously very powerful, able to field the largest army in the world, able to sweep into basically any other country on Earth, and either economically or militarily command it. And to a lot of people, they're like, oh, this is the best system. This is clearly the perfect system. To a lot of people, it is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine an end to capitalism. But when you look at that system, it's like, yes, it is built on a lot of people who are being paid a wage they can't live on. It's being built on third world sweatshops. And it's like, how do you take down a system like that? It's so ruthlessly efficient. It's so effective. And the people who live under that system, even the people who suffer under it, believe that it's the best system. Like, the Damani think they belong in leashes.
Yeah.
They think they are animals. That's the thing, is like, they've rescued, 10 of them? And 9 of them cannot be trusted to be unshielded.
Yes.
There's the only one who was, willing to act like a regular person was...
You're stretching the term.
Olivia. Yeah, not a regular person. I mean, obviously she's still kind of broken from her 300 plus years of slavery.
Yeah, I was going to say more along the lines of, she aligns her goals with them as best they can.
Yeah.
She's an arrow that can point
I don't think we ever mentioned this. Is not only is she, one of the oldest characters, but they find out that she's more powerful than any other character.
To the point where, I don't think that Sindane is a Forsaken.
I think she is.
But either way, someone who is working with the Forsaken on kind of a almost even playing ground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. In the 4th book, Naveen took on Moghedian and won.
We've discovered that Moghedian's a bitch.
She's not the most powerful, but she's still a Forsaken.
Oh, yes.
She is still one of the most powerful Aes Sedai to ever live.
And if she's in the Dream Realm, very difficult to take her down.
Even more difficult. She's more powerful there. But here's the Naveen can take on Moghedian, and this girl makes Naveen look like nothing.
Yeah. There's, we get to get my favorite part of these 2 books is the final battle. This big anime, very...
We shouldn't say the final battle, because TM.
Not the final... It does take place in the same place.
Tarmangaden takes place in the Pit of Doom up in the above the Borderlands in the Blight.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
They've got to go fight the Dark One where he lives. This is in Shadow Ghoul, which is the zone of chaotic evil where even the Dark One doesn't have... The Dark One is lawful evil. Shadow Ghoul is chaotic evil. They do not get along.
Okay. So, but no, the you have all of these anime-ish, not anime-ish, but there's a really amazing convergence of fights.
I guess we should set up what the climax is for the people who again didn't listen, or maybe the people who did listen but just like having it described by other people, because there is a certain thrill in hearing an interpretation.
Fire away.
But so Rand decides that he's going to purge the male half of the one power of the taint, the darkness that was put into it by the Dark One. That drives men mad, and it's the reason why men cannot channel for very long. Because they go crazy, or they deteriorate. They start thinking there's insects under their skin, and they tear themselves apart.
Or they become a 5-year-old boy in their own mind.
Become the mind of a child.
Yeah.
They start lifting things. They kill themselves and others, not knowing their power. And he's like, I'm going to heal the taint. And the Forsaken are like, he can't do that. We couldn't do that 1,000 years ago when we had futuristic technology and we knew everything. And then they find out, do you remember what they're called? Those Angriel he has?
What are they called?
I don't remember.
Okay. But no, it's basically 2 stupidly powerful, Angriel. They're literally So
just for reference, Angriel, things that can increase your power. They're normally something you can hold in your hand. Sometimes they're like rings.
Yes.
And they double your power.
Or a small Buddha.
Yeah. These Angriel are 2-story high towers with a statue of a man holding an orb that gathers in power from around it. And then he has a little version of the statue that's a foot tall or something like that.
Yeah.
You can't really carry it around in battle. But if you're doing something, you could sit there and channel, and it basically siphons from that tower. There's 2 of them. There's a male and a female statue, which can be used for both. and they find out they're like, Rand has both the keys. And they're like, he what?
No, what?
They're like, that fool, what's he going to do? Like,
that could crack the world in half.
Yeah, they're like, with one of them, you could crack the world in half. And they're like, whatever he's doing, we have to stop him. Because they're like, he's not going to be able to clear the taint. Mm-hmm. But trying, Lord knows what the fuck he can do. So there's this final thing of him, and he chooses Naveen to link with, because they're going to use both of them.
Also because Naveen is a very good healer.
Yeah. And
is actually really powerful.
And I guess they didn't really explain exactly what they're doing. I assume in the next book we'll kind of get a description.
Or we'll never get a description, because they describe what's going on in, like, physically watching it.
Yeah.
And they kind of esoterically describe what he's doing, but no idea.
Yeah, they're kind of, they mentioned that Naveen uses something with basically like healing to siphon the taint out of the male half of the Aes Sedai, and it forms this giant black ball over Shadar Logoth that is like seeping into the ground, where it's like, I guess it's either going into that place and like tainting it further, or maybe Shadar Logoth is like absorbing it. Because it's like, yes, delicious evil.
More darkness.
More darkness.
More blood for the blood god.
But it's basically like the two of them are sitting in a field, linked, outside of Shadar Logoth. Just like, basically, imagine Goku going Super Saiyan 3, but for like 8 hours.
Yeah, literally, the two of them are just sitting there, and
like eyes wide, glowing with light, as this huge orb starts growing bigger and bigger.
And as soon as this happens, every Forsaken's like, you fucking what, mate?
Yeah, it's basically everyone in the world who can channel is like, something's happening. They can tell, because, you know, when you channel that much of the power, everyone notices. But Rand brought with him basically a team of people.
No. Rand did not bring with him
Cad Swain.
Cad Swain's like, no, you're not doing this without me.
Yeah. And so there's this awesome thing of like, you have Rand here in this field, and then on the hills around him, like, 4 teams. You have Cad Swain and I think 2 other Aes Sedai linked together. Mm-hmm. And Cad Swain, of course, they always talk about Cad Swain has this thing in her hair with a whole bunch of little trinkets.
Yeah.
And they're like, all those trinkets are Angriel.
Yeah, and she just kind of dopely uses them. Like, one of them can sense where someone's channeling, even a man.
And they're just like lightning over there. As soon as someone like makes a portal like a mile away, they're like, douse it from orbit.
Yeah, nuke it. And then there's 2 Ashaman with them.
There's I think 3.
3
because there's 2 other Aes Sedai, and one of them has bonded with an Ashaman. Mm-hmm. Kind of like with the Warders, and they've linked together. Which linking together also is like a multiplier. It's not just like, we've got our 2 powers combined. It's like, we've got our 2 powers plus a bunch of extra. Mm-hmm. Especially when a man and a woman like link together.
Yeah.
And Rand has given one of them...
Kalendor,
the most powerful Angriel aside from those 2 things. Probably the most, even more powerful than those. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is the other Aes Sedai who has bonded like 2 other Ashaman, or it might have been 3.
It was 2 Ashaman.
Okay, yeah. So one is 2 Aes Sedai with an Ashaman with the most powerful Angriel, and the other one is an Aes Sedai with 2 Ashaman. And then the 4th team
is not a team at all.
It's just Alvarin. It's just the 400-old Shan Chan, and they gave her Naveen's Angriel, which is like
it's a multi-purpose
glove with like 4 rings on it, and each ring is a different Angriel.
And like you have this new player in the Forsaken team that's pretty much almost as powerful or slightly more powerful than some of them.
And she's just like, what's this, a lone person standing in my way?
And my favorite part is that she isn't just like standing, she's kind of pacing back and forth like a freaking tiger, just like, come at me. I
have been trained as a weapon for longer than you could imagine.
Yeah, like, and she literally offhandedly like throws a fireball at her, and then like
it just melts away. They're like, it's like it hit a net and just dissolved. It's one of the most epic things, because it's literally like, you know, you have this awesome centerpiece of Rand and Naveen just sitting in the center, like channeling the world apart, and then around them just these 4 pacing groups like, come what may, we'll face you.
Hell,
and then just like creeping in from all sides, every Forsaken from the 4 corners of the earth, except Moghedian, who's like, fuck that.
Yeah. I think that Demon Dread has one of the coolest moments where like he travels there.
He opens a portal, steps in.
It's like something comes at him. He makes immediately another portal, makes another portal. He's like teleporting around.
Yeah, but of course, Cad Swain is just like, if she senses someone channeling, she douses that area with lightning.
Yeah.
So as soon as he opens a portal within a mile or whatever, it's just like lightning's raining down, and he's just trying to stand somewhere, keep trying, he's like, where the fuck is it coming from?
It's an awesome scene.
Yeah, and just like, again, chills at the end, and you're sitting there, and it's like, you know, Rand and Naveen are passed out. Cad Swain is like trying to organize, we're gonna be fine. The other three are being like, the one Aes Sedai is crying over the dead Ashaman that she bonded with and felt him die, and is like, so sad. There's another dead Aes Sedai, I believe. And the Seanchan girl is like looking at her hand because it's been healed. Because she actually did take damage in it, but she's sort of realizing like, I used my power for good. And then the other Ashaman is just like looking into the sky like, it's clear. The taint is gone.
And we're just like, what's gonna...
That last line hurt me, but it just hit me so hard because they've talked throughout the series so much. Every time a woman channels, like, the world becomes more vibrant. Again, they kind of gloss over it later in the books, but the one power comes from the monotheistic God. It is the light of the Creator shining through you. When you channel, it's like feeling the light of God on you, and you were just like, I'm seeing the world for the first time. It's vivid, it's brighter, and when you stop channeling, when you don't embrace the light...
You want it back. You want it back so bad.
You're like, the world feels washed out and gray now. That's every time a woman channels. Every time a man channels, it's like, there's a split second of like, ooh, what's this? And then filth, and then like oil being rubbed on your skin, and then just like the urge to vomit.
And like fire on your skin, and just like, it's just nothing good.
Nothing good. And so the idea of him just standing there afterwards and being like, looking at his hands and looking at the sky, and finally be able to experience like what it's like to channel without anything there. What it's like to experience the world like he always should have been able to.
And then the scariest part about all that, there's an army of those.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like, that army was scary because at any point any of them could go crazy. Because all of them were pretty much, anytime they were channeling, they were angry. Because it's not comfortable to channel when you're a guy. And I'm really curious because they set up the two men who claim to be the dragon who are not Rand. There's Logain and Taim. And Taim is the one who's been training all the Ashaman. And he's
the Mahale.
Yeah, he's the leader. And he's also been, I think they revealed in this one that he told them to kill Rand if they could.
I don't think he did. I think that that was actually an illusion he created.
I don't know, I just remember, there's a dark friend Ashaman who is like, one of the Forsaken told me to kill Rand, the leader told me to kill Rand, but another guy told me to get this from him and didn't seem to not care if he died or not. And then he dies.
Yeah.
But he was thinking it in his head, so I'm like, I'm pretty sure Taim told that guy to kill Rand. I don't think Taim thinks... I think Taim thinks that Rand has already gone crazy. Either that, or he still thinks he's the Dragon Reborn.
I think that he just thinks that he's gone crazy. I don't know.
Either way, you've got Taim, who cannot be trusted, who is very hardline, very militaristic, and then you have Logain, who was gentled and then cured of it, and then has made his way to the Black Tower, and is forming a faction of guys who don't like the way that Taim is acting. And now that the taint is cured, I think we might see that sort of come to the head, where the Black Tower becomes split.
Yeah.
In the same way that the White Tower has been.
And it might be shattered, and Aes Sedai might walk its grounds. Oh wait, it will happen. Yeah. Because she has the viewings.
Yep. But yeah, I think we've been going long enough. We've said quite a bit. We actually talked more about this than I expected we would.
Same here, yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, I think before, it's probably because we read these and then we waited a little bit.
Yeah.
Normally it's right after we finish it, and we kind of finished it at different times. We have to make sure we start around the same time on the next one. But yeah, we went into this not really sure if we would have a lot to talk about, but once you get... ooh, pardon me. But once you get going on this stuff, like...
It's hard to stop the momentum of wanting
I
to
can
know
really,
more.
I really hope that once COVID is over, I want to go to Jordan Con.
Oh God, yes.
I can't wait. I can't wait until that the Amazon series comes out, because I would love if more people could get an appreciation for how great of a series this is.
I call cosplaying as Perrin. I'm cosplaying as Perrin.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I'll do Rand's dad, I guess. That's the age I'm going for.
Or
now.
you can go for Thom. You just got.
I gotta get longer mustaches.
You just trim up your mustache. You just dye your hair white. And just.
Yeah. But either way, we hope you all enjoyed. I'd like to take this moment to remind you that if you do enjoy the podcast, we're funded by the Hardleg Gaming Patreon. That's my main channel. You can check that out. It helps me pay Mr. Brandon here for his time and effort.
I am a slave to the capitalism that is Hardleg Joe.
I guess it doesn't really...
How do we stop this now?
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, normally with the other channels, I like to be like, oh, if you donate, we can improve the channel in various ways. I don't know how we could improve this, really.
If you donate, you'll just get more of the same, really.
Yeah, just to keep it going, because people are always coming and leaving and stuff like that. I guess the main incentive to donate is to,
We could improve videos.
Possibly. Do you guys want face cam?
You want face
Would you
cam?
like to see us sitting here in this room all sweaty talking at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Or some fun editing, maybe? I don't know.
We can't really do fun editing in like a audio format very well. Either way, like I said, I think the main incentive is just like, if you join the Patreon for $1 or more, get on the Patreon Discord. And then you can talk. I talk about like both upcoming books. I discuss some of my thoughts. I discuss books that I don't do for the show. And I think more importantly, we get patron questions. You can submit talking points and discussion points, things for us to talk about on the show. We didn't really have any this time, or we did. We got one. Someone was asking us if this is a slog, and I was like, we're already going to talk about that.
Yeah, that's already in. That was already on point on
so
this.
Yeah, either if you just like what we're doing and you want to support it, or if you want to join in yourself and take a more active role in the show, either way, the Patreon is there, patreon.com/hardleggaming, also linked down in the description. Again, we're going to be working on the 10th and 11th books together, so look forward to that in probably like 4 months or so.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, next book, I think we've decided we're going to be looking at Brandon Sanderson again. A lot of people have asked us to look back at him. We read Mistborn last time. Didn't really like it all that much.
No, not really.
But we've heard his high fantasy series,
the Stormlight
Archive.
Stormlight Archives. I'm not so much of a spoiler on this. I'm halfway through this, the first book on this, and I am wrong about Brandon Sanderson. You hear it now. I'm intrigued.
You're liking it more than Mistborn.
I'm liking it more than I wanted to.
You went in with a chip on your shoulder, and you ended up liking it.
Yeah, I went in there being like, Brandon Sanderson,
he's overrated. And then you're reading Stormlight Archive, and you're like, Joe, there might be some interesting stuff to talk about. So I've already ordered it. If you're interested in hopping on board something that's a completely new series starting at book 1, and I believe there's only 4 in that series.
Yeah, but Sanderson doesn't go as long as Jordan.
No. I mean, he has the thing he does, at least with like Mistborn, is like there's a trilogy of books, and then there's like a sequel series that's another trilogy, and then there's a trilogy of trilogies.
Not many people do what like
Jordan did. No one's done. This is literally the longest continuing fantasy series ever written.
Ah, okay.
There's been other stuff. There's stuff like Discworld, where it's like I think there's more words in that if you combine them all together, but they're not like a continuing stories. They're like a whole bunch of different side stories.
How many Game of Thrones books are there?
6.
6, so not even more than
And there's
Harry
going
Potter,
to be a 7th.
Yeah, not even more than Harry Potter. So
yeah. Most people don't get to 15.
Yeah. All right, well...
But yeah, so we'll be looking at that Stormlight Archive. Pick up a copy if you want to join us. And until next time...
Keep reading.
And may you find water and shade.
Yeah, that too.
By the light.